niggas pop tags. I pop the 4-5, niggas got swag. I got the Tech 9, niggas got cash, better run it. Only dubs and hundreds, I don't do 50s, nigga. And I don't do 50-year-old jiggers. Off that boss black Lamborghini interior, soft crack Louis V, raw fat, feeling like a tiger. I made something out of nothing like MacGyver. Started from an eighth, looked into a key, now I got them like, hey, trapping like Gucci. Plus I get more green than blue cheese, and I keep a red bandana in my blue jeans. So nigga calm your nerves with all that absurd. Fall from the curb, bullshit slash spoken word. You nerd, I'm from the same city as Venus and Serena, so don't get served. I'm so wavy, I don't need no yacht. Ain't no big pimpin' on my block, but I'm an underground king. Beast to Pimp C, catch me riding through the hood, 2010 Bentley. Yeah, you got cheese and I kill rats. Translation, I still trap, now do something with that. Or respond to this, and with the big ass lips, you got my name in your mouth, I hope it tastes like no homo. One more time, that's your promo. And I've been hard to the core since I went solo. Only man on my horse like my all black polo. And where I'm about to go is usually a no-no, but I'm loco, got the camel in the choco. Trying to sell me, I'm not from NYC. You can't even have a child by your destiny. And I ain't mean to take a shot at me. I blacked out like he did free, cause I'm so wavy. Too hardcore to be a Jay-Z. Rock more red than Easy Baby. Please say the baby. Been around for years, so bitch don't trade me. And this is not a diss, cause I was just out in LA with Drake, bitch. And no disrespect to G and hip hop, but nigga I'm a G and I'm doing this for hip hop. And that's Ye's brother, and yeah my nigga so I'ma give him some advice. Get rid of Amber Rose. I'ma tell you how she get down. How was at Dick's after party? Tipping Chris, she was whispering at Chris Brown. I seen Chris turn his head like then Gold Digger came on. I pointed like ho, but this ain't about her, it's just about hoes. I'ma chop down the rock and take it to the stove. I apologize to B, cause this about hoes. Time to chop down the rock and take it to the stove. DOA, no, T-Pain stays, old nigga go. I'm so wavy, too hardcore to be a Jay-Z. Only get in just like Dre, Beast, the nigga that cut Ye couldn't fade me. You took a shot and the shit grazed me. I wet it block just like the Navy. Put a label on the shit, right play me. DJs go in, DJs go in, cause I'm so Phone Flex, you my nigga. Clue, what up? DJ enough. I know y'all can't play this shit. It's too late. Jay, your boy. It's all good though. Y'all still my niggas. DJ Drama, K Slade. Lock in. I mean, this shit so hot, DJ. Might spin this shit at 50th birthday party. DJ Ski. Khaled know we the best. Yo, Don Cannon. I know y'all niggas locked in. DJ Chris Styles, Young Legend, New Jersey Devil, DJ Felly Fail, Air Deluxe, E-Man, ride this shit straight through Bitch Boy neighborhood. Kid Capri, tell Hobie Ho, leave that young nigga alone. I mean, DJ Red Alert, what up, OG? Red Out coming soon. I see you download my swag, Camel Face. Blueprint 3 gon' sell more cigarettes than it do records, nigga. Now I know why the taxes went up on tobacco, motherfuckers. Heard about your little fight backstage with Kanye, too. I got $1 million, say Kanye knock that nigga the fuck out. Just trying to make good music is all he trying to do. I mean, shit, you fucking with Ye for DOA, nigga. Coming soon. Please. I love 808s and heartbreaks. Nigga love lock down my shit. Tell the world why Chris Brown wasn't at the BT Award. This nigga told BT if they let Chris Breezy perform, him and Beyonce stand at home, old bitter ass niggas. Nigga Dame, man, that's your man. You and Dame was men's in them. You and Dame used to be tight with giraffe pussy and shit. You know your man having financial problems and shit. You #1 on the Forbes list, nigga. You make 35 million and shit. Get a nigga $1 million or something. I give it to him myself. Shit, I was only number 13, nigga, on the list, way down there with Jeezy and shit. Only earned 7 million this year so far, but I'm on tour, nigga, Lamborghini tour, live from Switzerland. I get to them. Shit, I could use 28 more million. But I wouldn't trade spots with you on the motherfucking Forbes list for that nose and them lips, nigga. My nigga Jay. Last but not least, peace to MIA. Cause The Rock about to be MIA. No one on the corner got a swagger like you. Cause no fucking corners, 42. Nigga, Lamborghini tour, live from Switzerland. I gets it in. Shit, I could use 28 more million. But I wouldn't trade spots with you on the motherfucking Forbes list for that nose and them lips, nigga. My nigga Jay. Last but not least, peace to MIA. Cause The Rock about to be MIA.
All right, everybody. That was I'm So Wavy by The Game, which was a diss track against Jay-Z. Now, I want everybody to understand that we're not using hip-hop music because we happen to be hip-hop enthusiasts here. It's just we're very hateful people. Isn't that correct, Mr. Adrian Lloyd, a.k.a. Just My Stupid Opinion? 1 second. I think he has to take the microphone off. Put it back on.
That threw me off for a second. I just had my volume still on, so you started talking like right as you ended. I suddenly heard you start speaking into the mic, so that threw me off for a second. I'm doing good today, Bolt. How are you?
Pretty good. I think I also had the preview on at the time, which I think will help me. Like if there is a copyright, they'll probably throw it off because the stream was laying over on each other. So those people in the audience complaining about the music are the usual suspects. We have Ryu over here coming here. He said he came here to downvote because we have a moderator that we actually removed his wrench last week because he just has like zero taste in music. So Ryu, welcome back. Welcome back, Larry. Welcome back, Pinochet. Just My Stupid Opinion. So today we're going to be dealing with a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Just finding people who comment on stuff that they haven't read. Okay, and Jordan B. Peterson is probably, he's one of probably the top 5 most famous Canadians in the world. Would you agree with that, Adrian Lloyd?
At this point, I think so. He's right there behind like the Tragically Hip. But yeah, no, he's definitely a man who is most well known in the Canadian life these days, well respected because of a lot of the work that he has done, and also a very controversial figure in leftist Canada. You either love the guy or you hate the guy. That's really the only two extremes you can have. Personally, I really enjoy listening to Jordan Peterson. I think he's got some pretty good insights and well thought out points of view. And he's helped me understand things a lot in a better way. I would say I actually have developed a much better understanding of the way people, I guess, because I'm not religious at all, like it could give me a better understanding of how the religious people the approach they take when they're thinking about God and their idea of their religion. So he's done a lot of good work, and yes, definitely one of the most famous people in Canada these days.
Yeah, I'd say like there's a few like obviously there's Justin Bieber, there's Justin Trudeau, there's Wayne Gretzky, who's another famous Canadian. Mike Myers, I think although his career is kind of in the toilet now. Norm Macdonald. So Jordan Peterson.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. Oh, Ryan Reynolds is. I actually saw a movie with Ryan Reynolds yesterday, Mississippi Grind. Very good movie. So I might actually do a review on that soon. I don't know if it's a new movie, but it was pretty awesome about gambling addiction. So
I'll have to check that out. I've always enjoyed Ryan Reynolds movies. I always found he was particularly funny, especially in the Deadpool movies.
Yeah, I haven't seen either Deadpool yet. So people keep telling me to watch it, and I'm just not. I just never get. I can't really get hyped up on any superhero movies anymore. So, it's nothing against the franchise, but I just never get around to watching any of those, except maybe Guardians. I do still like Guardians of the Galaxy, regardless of the whole controversy over what's his name. I think James Gunn is the guy's name, right?
Yeah, James Gunn, with everything that ended up happening with him. Oh, and I just want you to know that not watching the Deadpool movies is a sin because, as the Bible said, on the 3rd day, God said, "Thou must watch the Deadpool movies."
Well, I'll try to look up that verse. I don't recall it in all my years of theological training, but look, the Jordan Peterson thing is very interesting because I think Peterson never tells people to absolutely agree with him. He's a Jungian psychiatrist from Toronto, and or no, is he a psychiatrist or a psychologist? He's a clinical psychologist, I believe.
Yeah, I
And
believe it's psychologist.
yeah, so he's a practicing therapist, and he's always said, there are other ways to approach psychological treatment, whether it's Freudian and Rogerian, and I mean, there's other ones I just haven't heard of, like Rogerian and it's like I don't think he's the type of person who tells people to believe in dogmas. And I actually watched a video with one of his colleagues, Gad Sad, where he said
The Gadfather.
Yeah, and I like a lot of his videos as well. And he said, just because I'm friends with Jordan Peterson doesn't mean I don't think that Jungian archetypes are not bullshit, because he's a huge critic of that. So, that Jordan Peterson isn't the type of person who goes around and throws his weight around and says, well, either you agree with my point of view or you're some sort of just Neanderthal boar. I don't really see it from him. Maybe I'm wrong, but here in this video, Jimmy Dore takes he shows just how ignorant he is of that. And I'm gonna be going into the topics that they discuss that Peterson alluded to in a tweet. So that they're basically criticizing him for a tweet on climate science. And then there's other things that they say about him personally that are kind of they're just them eating the same liberal media that they tend to criticize for being corporate shills. So before we go into the video, anything for you to say? Did you see the video last time? I know we were discussing.
No, I didn't end up watching it last time. I kind of forgot about it after we did our last live stream because we didn't get around to it. The only thing I would add on to what you said is about Jordan Peterson and people don't have to agree with him is if that was more the way that he was presenting himself, then he would be the exact thing he's fighting against. Because one of his main criticisms of society these days has to do with this idea of the social justice warrior and how, the moral outrage that follows them around. You either agree with me or you're a bigot, racist, and every other ism in the dictionary. So, there's no way he could be that way. Otherwise, he could get torn down really easily for, I guess, in a way, becoming the monster that he fights against.
Yeah, so without further ado, I think let me just adjust the display because I want to be able to see the chat live. I have Nick's Radio here. I like that guy. He has a lot of good comments. So everybody, please tweet or share this out. Share it on Gab as well. I've gone back to using Gab. Not as many people on Gab as on Twitter, but I mean, you have to realize that when you tweet something on Twitter nowadays, hardly anybody sees it anyway. So,
are you still Chef Leopard on Gab?
Yep. Or no,
Okay.
I've always been Starscream85.
Starscream, okay.
What's going on with Ryu's comments? Does he keep deleting them, or is YouTube deleting them? In any case, so
I'm not sure.
So I'm gonna play the video. I'll tell you when to stop, what timestamp. So you ready?
Ready to go.
Okay.
Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm here with the miserable liberal Steph Zamorano and Ron Placone. Hi, Ron.
Hello.
I'm miserable.
Hi. I'm doing the show without my glasses. It's a big
Wow.
day. It's a big day. Oh, I got them right here.
Whoa.
Pause. This is like Jimmy is all the time like he's interspersing between being Mr. Goofy and Mr. I'm the real serious news person. So I mean, this is basically like Jimmy Dore is like he always sits there and does something like this, and his hair's like that, and he gets like really he just rages out and he's like, Obama fucked me because he said he would do A and then he just put it in the A. That's basically the way that every single Jimmy Dore video goes. Like that's one of the reasons I'm drawn to watching the video, just to see him get really pissed off at stuff. He's almost like the bizarro Alex Jones in a certain way.
That's kind of funny to even think about these because
of the
he
spitting
hates
incident.
Alex Jones.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that before we went on. That everybody remembers the spitting incident, right?
Yeah, the spitting incident. Like I said before we went live, that was something that any respect I did have for Jimmy Dore, that just went right out the window after that. There was just nothing left about the man that I respected or liked. Not that I really liked him very much to begin with. But yeah, no, for him, he's an interesting one because he kind of he talks about how he's a comedian. Yet I've tried watching one of his stand-up sets one time, and it wasn't funny. It was just a lot of political talk with a lot of really bad punchlines in it. So he's not even that funny to begin with. And to me, he just strikes me more as just a contrarian who's always looking for something to rail against. Which, whether that happens to be up against Obama because Obama didn't do exactly what he wanted, or now it's because Trump's in office. I have a feeling that even if Bernie Sanders had won the presidency, won the Democratic primary, and then won the presidency, I'm pretty sure he'd find some reason in order to rail against Bernie Sanders as well, even though Bernie Sanders was like his love child or something.
Yeah. I think with Jimmy, there's this issue where he always says that he's just his words are always a jag-off comedian. That's how he describes himself. Yet for some reason, it's impossible for anybody else to be right on any issue that he's like with net neutrality. He was just ranting about it all the time. Like, oh, they're going to fuck with our internet or whatever. Well, it wasn't net neutrality that did that. It was, in the end, it was actually the Democrats in Congress that have been, at least in the U.S., they've been basically calling for people to be banned. And to his credit, this is where I'll give Jimmy Dore credit, and I have already several times, but I might as well mention it here. He has spoken out against censorship of InfoWars and a number of other creators, but this video was from before that happened. So let's keep going. I'm at 14 seconds. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I can't actually remember specifically if Jimmy Dore had ever done this, but the news source that he works for, the Young Turks, they're constantly talking about things such as hate speech and that. So I really question how much his commitment is to freedom of speech, because those two, you can't have both in the same world. You can't have free speech and have hate speech in the same world. So for him to be sort of presenting himself in that way, I don't know. I don't know if I really would say that he's true in his nature. I mean, most recently, the one where I heard him railing against that was when I was watching him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about the censorship of Alex Jones, and he didn't agree with it. But at the same time, considering how much his news source likes to talk about pretty much about censorship and censoring people and not letting people have their words, that I don't believe his commitment to free speech is actually one that you and I would have. We want people to be able to talk and have their free speech, regardless whether we agree with them or not, regardless if we think they're full of crap or not. I think for Jimmy, he just likes to present himself that way. But in the first point where it's actually relevant to his position, he would censor anybody and call it hate speech in a moment.
Yeah, I would say that's a good issue, and we'll get to the video in a second, but his whole comment on freedom of speech and how there shouldn't be any censorship is extremely self-serving, in that he's been talking about for a while with the demonetizing and all of that, and it usually happens once it reaches his doorstep and he gets demonetized or something. But he's never spoken out against Crowder being demonetized, which also was happening before the InfoWars banning. He never spoke out against for example, there's a lot of creators who have been either smeared in the media. PewDiePie, not a political guy, never mentioned, he just dwarfs any of these people, whether you're talking about Peterson or Jimmy Dore. So Jimmy Dore is he's a not in my backyard guy. He's okay with other people being censored until he realizes that it's the flood is coming to his doorstep.
That's a good way to put it, for sure.
So let's keep going. It's 14 seconds in. You ready?
Go.
I really can't see anything.
Oh.
So, you know that guy, Jordan B. Peterson?
Uh-huh.
Is that his name? Jordan? Jordan B. Peterson from Canada, eh? And, Canadians are nice, eh? They're polite. I like them. And I don't really know much about this guy, Jordan B. Peterson. I know he got upset when...
Sorry, you got the old buffering bullshit now.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm
Sounds
here
good,
with-
eh?
Yeah, he did the whole stereotypical
I
thing. You know,
Kind
these
of
people who
whatever he
they
didn't
care
wanna
so
say.
much about cultural appropriation. He just appropriated Canada right there. So, how do you feel about
No,
that,
dude,
Adrian?
booty.
Are they stealing your culture?
I am very offended, and now I want Jimmy Dore to be completely off the air, and I want all his sponsors to pull advertisements from him. It's only fair.
Yes, if you're watching in the audience, please send because the internet is now banning all of us. Please write some hate letters with maple syrup ink and send them to Jimmy Dore, so that we can, in solidarity to our Canadian brothers up north. So 36 seconds in. Ready?
Okay, go.
quasi-law to make him say transgendered instead of whatever he didn't want to say. He had to refer to... So that's how he got famous, right? It was a transgender thing, right?
I think so. I've never watched anything by him, but
Me
based
neither.
on what I've seen online, if I do watch anything...
Damn it. 51 seconds. This is not working very well. We should do this one day on your channel.
Sounds good. If it really gives you a hard time right now, we can always move over there if you like.
Well, now I can't hear the volume. Second.
by him.
The
but
Google
based on what I've
overlords don't
seen
want you to do your
online,
presentation
if I do
here
watch
tonight,
anything
Bold.
by him, I'm
Here we
sure
go,
I'm
going.
not going to get what he meant.
Okay.
That's what everybody said. Like, no, you're misinterpreting it. And
It's
I'm like,
that,
okay,
it's
yeah,
that
I
Sam
get it.
Harris thing. You're not.
Yes.
You don't know where you're not.
No, you're taking it out of context. And it's like, okay, well, I've never watched anything by this guy.
I've seen him on the Joe Rogans, just a little snippets here and there.
Damn it, it just does it like over and over again.
Yeah. Well, we can try something a little bit
Everybody,
different. If
welcome
it
to the
keeps
Jimmy
giving you
Dore
problems,
Show.
maybe what I can do is can you hear stuff if I screen share it?
Not through Hangouts. So actually, no, I can't hear it because it has to be streaming on my desktop.
Oh, gotcha.
So even if I don't even know if we can hear through Hangouts, but if it's not streaming on my desktop, the audience can't hear it.
Okay, I
snippets here and
gotcha.
there. And he seems like a sincere, earnest fellow.
So
I
it's
did see
playing at
him, a
1:15
little
now.
bit of him with that Michael
Okay.
Eric Dyson, who's not one of my favorite people. Michael Eric Dyson debating. And, Michael Eric Dyson, I think, is just a neoliberal. So he wasn't my favorite guy to... So Jordan P. Peterson, though.
So we have he's taking a shot at Michael Eric Dyson, which I'm fine with. But like with Jimmy Dore, there's two types of people there's three types of people in the world. There's good people, there's neoliberals, and there's hate mongers. So that's how he lumps in. And Michael Eric Dyson isn't just. I don't think he's actually a neoliberal. I think he is as much of a socialist as Jimmy Dore is. He's just much less of a principled one, and he's a bigger sellout than anybody that. Like I would say that Jimmy Dore falls in on the same side as Cornel West, who's a big rival of Michael Eric Dyson. But this has almost nothing to do with Michael Eric Dyson being a neoliberal. It just happens to be Cornel West takes a much more extreme stance on many issues than does Dyson. So I'm at 131.
Okay.
Though I have seen Kyle Kalinske, Secular Talk, has done videos about him, and he's like he's overly religious.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys who thinks that there wouldn't be art if there wasn't religion, that kind of thing. Like, dude. And and he said so he's doing this. So do you know what the Well, what's the Prager University? We all know that's
The
just
right-wing
garbage,
thing,
right?
yeah.
That's called pseudoscience. That's not actual science. They take scientific words and mix them around to trick you. They don't actually try to inform you. They do videos and use sciencey words to make you think climate change isn't real.
Okay, so pause at 2:18.
Okay.
We're able to hear all that. It was kind of the screen keeps freezing here. So, in any case, what they do here is they basically slam Prager University. Now, we have a guy who comes on the show. I don't know if you've ever been on the same time as him, Alex, who is basically a Prager University zombie. And I'll say this. If you think that your opinions can be respected just because you share Prager University videos, then you don't know what the hell the intention is behind them. Prager University basically introduces a second opinion on a number of topics. So, like I actually listen to Prager's show when I'm driving to lunch usually, because there's nothing better. Yeah, they are censoring Ryu Shiska here. Hold on. I don't know if this will stop it. For some reason, yeah, his chat messages are just not getting through. I don't know why. But in any case, there's an issue with Prager University. People don't understand what the hell it is. Okay, if you think that Prager University is a fraud because it's not an actual college, then you should also consider whether you consider like that's the same as thinking that Pizza Hut should actually be built out of straw with fucking villagers running around like a hut on an island or something. So 1 second.
There's things right here that I do. There's a couple things on there that I do agree and disagree with Jimmy. One thing is that, like, I do agree with that people who are talking about Prager University and criticizing them as if it's a real university are kind of full of crap. At the same time, I have heard Dennis Prager himself talk about how you get yourself a free education from Prager University, which to me is also a bit of load of crap on that. And I do know I do kind of see sometimes what here that Jimmy's talking about how he says like they kind of mix and mash the words to try and make things work. I mean, one that I did see by Prager University was talking about is there life on is there intelligent life on other planets? What are the chances of it? And they were interchanging life and intelligent life, and they actually were misquoting some of the people that they showed on there. Like I think one was Christopher Hitchens that they were talking about, and they only did a partial quote by him. So there's some things that Jimmy is right on this, but all in all, he's just trying to do a general bash on Prager University. And I'm not even the biggest fan of Prager University, but yeah, like more than anything, he's just like his whole point of his channel was to give an alternate point, and I think he was one of the big channels to come onto the scene, right as YouTube was really more dedicated to more the left wing of politics, and they needed an opposing point of view. So I think he's done a good job with that.
Yeah, I would say that Dennis Prager is like there's issues where I think he's kind of a neocon. He's of the same vein as Ben Shapiro, the guy whose name I like to really shit on. But Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager, I think that they serve a certain purpose on the internet. They're kind of they explain a number of topics. As far as cultural issues, as far as sometimes fiscal issues as well, here in the United States, on Social Security, etc. And I don't believe that Prager, for example, is ever pro-censorship. Ben Shapiro has a very inconsistent record on it, but Prager, for example, has been censored numerous times, and they never mentioned that issue. And he was just censored this week by Facebook. They had to. I think that they ended up taking down a long catalog of videos of his, and then they put them back up, and they were like, "Oh, it was an honest mistake." So where's Jimmy's video calling for fair treatment for Prager? Well, it's not going to happen because Jimmy doesn't actually have a real commitment to free speech, like you said. He has a commitment to saving his own ass. So I think we're ready to keep going.
Just a quick update. I literally just watched in the chat as about 4 of Ryu's messages went from being seen to redacted.
Yeah, I don't know what I changed it from top chat to live chat, and it still isn't working. So I think that they are fucking with his messages, and I think he's been trying to get it. Yeah, and now I think a few of the other messages have been disappearing. So I don't know what the hell's happening with him. And it's not like me and Ryu get along on the channel. He's the one with the, there's only 2 types of music. There's Guns N' Roses and there's elevator music. So I do want him back because, of course, it's a good person to make fun of in the chat. So, fuck. Don't worry, Ryu. We're not going to let you get, I mean, if anybody's going to bully you, it's us. So fuck you, YouTube. Yeah, I think he might have just left too. Nick's radio says his message is about to be retracted. Let me see that. So can you send me a chat on the Hangouts if that happens? Because I'm gonna put the video now. I'm not gonna be paying attention to the chat.
Yeah.
Well, here's one of them.
And I'm good to go whenever you are.
Jordan B. Peterson
press
tweeted
play.
out something for the anti-capitalist environmentalists to hate. Oh, they love doing that. They love triggering people. Oh, I bet you're triggered. Are you triggered? I triggered you, didn't I? Are you triggered yet? You seem triggered. Are you triggered? I'm triggering you, aren't you? So that's what this is. And so he tweets that.
Sorry, I'm at 241 and it
Everybody
froze
welcome.
again.
All right.
Yeah, I just saw that they censored. What the hell is going on with the chat today?
And so he tweets,
one of 2 things. Either they're censoring your actual chat itself, or these people are fucking with us.
No, I don't think Nick would be. Yeah, that's screwed up. Because Nick never, to my knowledge, Nick has never pulled any like chat shenanigans. I mean, we all do that, but I don't think I've ever seen him do that. So what the hell happened with that? That's screwed up. We're gonna need a new platform.
Definitely.
All right, so press play 241.
Okay.
that out. And
Do you hate it? I'm indifferent. No, I think you hate it. Still feeling a little indifferent. You hate it. All right.
You're upset. You're upset.
It's hard to hate somebody with a blue check.
It is. But I do.
So press pause at 255.
Okay.
They're so full of shit here because, yes, they always complain about things that are happening. That now Jimmy Dore's show isn't as much about that, but the Young Turks for sure is literally complaining all the time about sexist people in games, about there's white supremacy issues. They hired Sean King, the biggest Pied Piper of racism ever.
The whitest black guy ever.
Right. He's like Al Sharpton's Caucasian nephew. That's it's ridiculous. And then they say, oh, blue checkmark people are the ones that, well, Jimmy has a blue checkmark, I believe, as well. But Jordan Peterson, why does he have a blue checkmark? Because he had a best-selling book on Amazon for months. For months. So look, I think Twitter is nonsense. I think Twitter is basically in a few months, Twitter's model is going to completely implode. But it totally makes sense that Jordan Peterson would, being as he is a best-selling author on psychology and social issues, should have a blue check mark. I don't see why anybody would call that, oh, you're triggering us. Well, Jordan Peterson doesn't do that. And then the reason that he's always talking about people being triggered by him is that people get sued or they get basically ostracized, as in the case of Lindsay Shepard, for sharing Jordan B. Peterson videos in lectures. So people are being triggered by videos of him being shared. It has nothing to. So he's trying to say, oh, they're just assuming that we're all snowflakes. No, the issue is that this is a person who's basically being censored all the time. You go to you go to lectures by Peterson all over the country, and there will just be this mob of sensitive pussies outside trying to complain that this person is endangering their rights and existence. So,
yeah, absolutely. No, and absolutely. This is something that Jordan Peterson's been through many, many times over again. So he has every reason to believe it. And yeah, he has been censored, and he has had people show up at just about every single one of his speeches to protest him because they see him as, ironically enough, they see him as a spokesperson for the alt-right, even though if you actually listen to what the alt-right says and what Peterson says, they're completely different. The alt-right makes fun of Jordan Peterson, and the alt-right is about, Peterson talks about individual rights when the alt-right talks about group rights. So there's a huge difference in between the two, but they always like to slander him this way. And just a little bit off topic, because we were kind of mentioning about Sean King and that, I actually saw something, I think it was yesterday on Twitter, where Tariq Nasheed ended up putting out a tweet which showed like some black girl. She had like a broom or something like that, and she was smacking some white guy on the head with it in class. And then he had, I don't remember what he actually captioned it as, but somebody retweeted and says, everyone watch this video and I'll show you how there's something serious as anti-white racism. And then Tariq Nasheed ended up replying to it saying, why do you always have to pull the race card into everything? I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
But that is a kind of funny joke on Tariq Nasheed's part, even if you think he's an asshole. Because
I think he was being serious.
Yeah, but I think if he was joking, that's like a funny joke because he's like the one always accused of. But it's pretty funny. But
I thought you get a kick out.
What was the caption for that video though?
I can't remember. I think I can find it for you. I ended up replying or retweeting it or something, so I'll find it for you and I can let you know.
Okay, so we're gonna play at 2:55.
Okay.
Climate change, what do scientists say? Climate change is an urgent topic of discussion among politicians, journalists, and then Prager University does a misleading video where they actually make you dumber after you've watched it. That's PragerU is like the anti-university. After you're done watching one of their courses, you know less about the subject. I don't know how they do that, but they do it. So, for instance, he tweets...
So pause at 3:20 now. He says that they put together a misleading video. Now, there's nothing preventing Jimmy Dore from actually going through a 4 or 5 minute video to debunk PragerU's points. I think that the fact is that they don't always do that because they're not like Kyle Kalinski's channel, which I think that's his focus. But you claim that the video itself is misleading or whatever. Well, then what's the truth here? So he does go into what the tweeter says. There's a tweeter who replies to Jordan Peterson. So you ready? 3:20.
First things first, I found that tweet by Tariq Nasheed. So it's a video of the black girl hitting the white guy in the head with a broom, and he says, I don't know the context of this clip, but it looks to me like the intro for a very interesting movie. Quote, hey, that's me in the chair. I bet you're wondering how I got into this situation. First, let me go back and tell you how my day started. That was what he ended up saying about the video.
Yeah, so Ryu is saying that they're fucking with his account. He should try... I have a couple of accounts or screen names, so maybe he should try re-entering and using a different one, see if they screw with him that way. Of course,
maybe that'll work for him.
He could be trolling us, but I mean, I don't care. If he is, it's good for you, man, because it's pretty funny. The thing is, I think I pissed him off because I was like shitting on him last stream because of the whole Guns N' Roses thing, GNR gate, I guess we'll call it. But if YouTube is trying to curate his comments, maybe he should try going to a different stream simultaneously and see if he can comment there. If they're doing it to him there, then yeah, they really are trying to screw with his commenting privileges, or I guess whatever you call it. commenting privileges, commenting rights. I don't know what to call it. So 3 minutes and 20 seconds. You ready?
Ready.
Tweets out this video, and inside this video, so this guy, Peter Norway, broke it down. He watched the video, and he's going to explain to you just a few of the BS things in it. He says Jordan Peterson sharing a really lazy, easily debunked climate change denial video from Prager University while mocking environmentalists. Peterson is just another anti-science right-winger, and if you believed otherwise, you've been fooled. I know he is overly religious, and him tweeting out Prager University climate change videos means
354. Pause. Overly religious. What is he putting out fatwas to kill some Salman Rushdie? Is that overly religious, Jimmy? Because I don't think you've ever mentioned that. You know, because unfortunately, Salman Rushdie has been living for over 20 years under threat of death, and I bet when Jordan Peterson gets in the elevator, you know, Salman Rushdie shits his pants, right?
Yo, absolutely. No, it's just thing is too is while you definitely there are the religious types out there that are anti-science, like I would say the ones that believe the Earth is just 6,000 years old. I would classify them a lot, but that doesn't just because you're religious doesn't immediately make you anti-science. But I do find it funny that considering how the left is the one pushing the whole gender pronouns things and are completely denying science of gender, that they're now making the claim of, well, he's an anti-science right-winger, as if the two are interchangeable. There can be anti-science people on the right. There can be anti-science people on the left. It's just you have to, if you're going to see the information, if you're going to look at the science and then go against it simply because it doesn't fall in line with your beliefs, then you're anti-science.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's a huge I mean, obviously, I'm not a Christian. You're not a Christian. I am Jewish. There's, you know, for somebody to claim that there's no, you know, real clash between certain religious beliefs and you know, science, especially if you're talking about geology and biology, then, you know, you are in denial. That's absolutely true. But Jordan Peterson doesn't really talk about issues like evolution and climate science day to day. This happens to be one time when he shared something about it. So earlier they were complaining about him not using transgender pronouns. Now I wonder, you know, can they actually explain the science behind, you know, this whole gender redefinition or whatever? They can't, because it wasn't established through scientific research and debate and development. It was established through social pressure. So they don't really care about the ethics of scientific research at all. They care about establishing certain protocols for society to follow that are consistent with their belief system. And it has nothing to do with believing in science. And I'm somebody, Adrian, I believe you're also in a STEM field as well, technically. You know, I could talk all the time about how there's all these people who they don't understand, for example, emissions issues, because I did take a lot of emissions classes in college, especially, you know, combustion. So a lot of these people, they don't understand when you get beyond the debate over climate change, which I guess, you know, I acknowledge that there's you know, I would call myself an agnostic. I'm not denying climate change. At the same time, I'm not totally on board with a lot of the policy proposals, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So based on what I know about combustion and about industrial emissions, what they're proposing will actually do nothing to curb climate change at all. It's actually just, you know, it's just a feel good pick me up for them. It doesn't make any sense at all. The Paris Climate Accord wouldn't have done anything because for the next 10 years, India and China would have probably just made up for all of the reduced emissions in Europe and the Americas. And we would have still had the same amount of emissions. And then what would you have said? Because in the end, the emissions would not be reduced. Let's say the climate continued to get to those panic levels that they're talking about. Well, then apparently the Paris Climate Accord was worthless, because those industries that want to produce those products, they're not going to not produce them. They're going to go to India and they're going to open a factory there. Okay, it's just a fact of life. Now, would you rather have those companies producing those goods here in the U.S., where at least, or in Canada, or in France or something, where there is a certain degree of emphasis on reducing harmful emissions into the atmosphere, additives that create poor air quality? Or would you rather have it happen in Malaysia or Thailand, where smog is basically covering the entire skyline? That's the question I want to ask. It's not just an issue of climate change per se; it's an issue of air quality. And I'm not one of these anti-environmentalists on the right. I actually believe that there does have to be a clean air standard. I believe in conservationism. I was against the Dakota Access Pipeline. I do think that there should be investment in renewable energy sources. But I'm not going to buy into the whole climate science religion that they've promoted.
And I would say that my views on climate change fall more or less in line with yours, that I do care about the environment. I actually, right now, the one thing that I care about a lot is the water, because Canada has a large water supply. So I'd like to keep that. I'd like to keep that clean, and it's definitely going to be valuable eventually at some point in the future, without a doubt. So I'd like to keep that clean. I do care about how we're doing, and yeah, definitely stuff like keeping our air clean is absolutely vital. But a lot of the policies that they do push these days don't help any of that. I mean, the two big ones that you hear about these days are either a carbon tax or the cap and trade, and either way, they both kill industry, number one, but number two, they're more than anything, they're just a cash grab whenever they want to do carbon tax. It's really not going to persuade businesses to spend less to cap their emissions. And at least if we could make clean energy a lot more profitable, then absolutely, let's go for it. But right now, when we're looking at it, they want to make this huge push to stuff like solar energy and wind energy. But all these areas need to be subsidized at the moment. They can't survive on their own. In fact, just a little while ago in Canada, our environmental minister was just tweeting something out about how they're going to invest about $1 million into renewable energy sources, and they're expecting to have about $47,000 come back. So they're literally making a loss of $932,000 roughly. I'm off the top of my head, my math isn't the best. But yeah, so right now they're just not profitable. They're just not doable. It would just lead us into greater debt, and it would also actually make the population poorer. At the same time, why should we treat every single country the same way? Like, for instance, the Paris Climate Accord. Why should we treat every single country the same way when countries such as America and Canada don't pollute nearly as much as these other big countries, which just have no real regulations in place? Like China is a good one. We see the smog all the time in places like Beijing or Hong Kong. And they're not really going to do anything to cap those. So why should everybody over here be taxed because of it when everyone else is not really going to do anything about it? In the past, actually, they've done absolutely nothing in order to stop their emissions from going. So it either has to be a complete global initiative, or it can't work whatsoever. I mean, if Canada and America are going to tax their carbon, China isn't, then in the end of the day, you're still going to have the same problems. But the other thing is worth talking about too is the fact of how much these environmentalists make when how much of these environmentalists make while pushing this doomsday prophecy. I mean, Al Gore is in, what is he, like $50 million right now? Like he has a huge amount of money from pushing that inconvenient truth movement.
Yeah, the carbon credits too. He's been. I don't know if the carbon credits are worth much anymore, but he did make for a long time a lot of money off of that. Maybe he cashed in at the right time, but yeah, you're absolutely right that. And I've heard this. There's a guy called the Sane Environmentalist. I think I'll try to have him on one time. I've tried contacting him, but of course, I haven't been in the loop as much either. So there are a lot of people who do care deeply about the environment, conservationism, wildlife, the oceans. There's that massive garbage patch. And nobody gives a fuck about any of that because they're hearing about this climate change nonsense that nobody can do anything about. So I want to keep going. We're at 3:54.
Okay, ready when you are.
He's anti-science. So this guy is what we would call, in regular, normal, everyday language, he would be called an anti-intellectual.
Yeah.
He's an anti-intellectual. So you can't tweet out PragerU University videos and be anything but an anti-intellect. Literally, they are trying to fool you and misinform you about everything.
Imagine if you were citing a PragerU video on like an academic paper where you like give the YouTube link and they're like, oh, okay, is this video what you're citing? And it's like,
Okay, so 4:30, my video is out. I'm at 4:34 actually. My video keeps popping around, so I think we're gonna have to keep starting and stopping. But in any case, what he's saying here is basically this is like the definition of being dishonest. Okay, so they're saying if you tweet out a PragerU video, you're by definition anti-science. So really, a bunch of people who believe that you can just define gender by what you ate that morning, whether you ate an omelet or some pork rinds or something, whatever way you feel, that's whatever gender you are. They're complaining about somebody being anti-science, even though PragerU's videos are not all about science. A lot of them are about, for example, the Civil War. The majority of them are very political. But Prager University is not meant to be a comprehensive education. People think it is, and I think that Prager markets it as an alternative to the academic industrial complex, the universities that are slanted to the left. He basically, this is the way he pitches it, okay? And you can call it dishonest if you want. That's your choice. But I've heard him talk about it this way, okay? He introduces a topic in about 4 to 5 minutes, and he'll have somebody discuss it. For example, I think he had a soccer player discussing the issue of participation trophies, whether they're a good idea or not. I forgot his name. He used to play for the U.S. national team. So he'll basically introduce the topic, and then you can explore it further. I believe that in most of the videos it cites a number of sources that you can go to, and that's how you do it. It's not meant to be an academic, rigorous treatise on something. It's literally just an introduction to a topic. And then, you can choose not to believe the video. There are a number of PragerU videos that I think are kind of they're oversimplifying and they're generalizing a lot. And I don't think that Prager makes it out to be that this is the unvarnished truth that is, they're thinking that the rest of the world behaves like them. That if you don't think like they do, you must be some sort of animal or something. And that's just not the way that Prager feels. I think he does have a lot of, very judgmental comments about atheism, for example. That's where I think that he's gotten into the whole moralizing area. But again, this is a religious person, and he believes that people should be religious. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's atheists like Hitchens, who has very judgmental arguments about religion. So they're basically doing some sort of character assassination on Peterson, because he shared a video that's a few minutes long about a topic that they themselves probably couldn't explain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the whole point is just linking Peterson directly to the PragerU video, but they're not taking into account anything else that he's ever talked about. Peterson has hours, like I don't even know how many hours on YouTube that you can look up. He's got plenty of lectures on there. He has his I don't remember the series name, but he did like a biblical series too. There's plenty of stuff that they could go to and just to sort of see what the man is, who the man truly is, and what he's really about. But they're taking the smallest thing that he's done, and they're narrowing in on and focusing on him to try and destroy everything that he's built up to this point, which is everybody has something that they've posted on social media that maybe it wasn't put out, maybe it was something kind of stupid you said, or maybe not your best moment, and anybody could focus on those moments and try and tear you down. I mean, I'm sure I could go out there and find something of Jimmy Dore that he did. Hell, I can. I mean, we could just go back to the whole RNC situation where he spat in Alex Jones' face, and then we can narrow in on that and just say that's who the guy is. This is who Jimmy Dore is. He spits in your face and he runs away. But so yeah, they're not doing this in a very, not a very smart way, but not even in a very ethical way. They're not representing him properly whatsoever in this whole situation.
Right. So let's see. I mean, I think they do go through a couple arguments on this. So 434. You ready?
Ready.
Like no, the commercial before the video is what I'm citing because that's the PragerU thing.
More honesty in the commercials on that channel. How about that? So he says this Prager University video uses all the standard climate change denial tricks. I'll show a couple of them. Like here, they show a graph of a 10-year period where it looks like the temperature isn't changing much. The next two screenshots illustrate how that trick works. So you see, right? So I don't know if you can see that, but it's like, oh, look, from 1997 to 2016. Look, it all stays right around the same. It goes up, it goes down, but it's right around the same. So climate change isn't going crazy. That's how they do it, right? And so this shows you how this is how skeptics view global warming, right? So he's taking a piece like this, but skeptics look at the bigger picture, right? So you can see how this has been going up every couple of decades. Well, for instance, look at that right.
I don't think that's the same graph, by the way.
I don't think so.
Yeah, hold on, because the profile doesn't look the same. Let me see if I can rewind. It's still giving me shit here. I'm gonna go back to 524.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show.
So
I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think that this guy might have just bullshitted his own thing. So let me see what that graph cites. Climate change over time. And then the next clip is, so that's global surface temperature change degrees Celsius. So we don't even know if they're talking about the same metric at all. So I think that it could be that Peterson is lying, or not Peterson, but the video that Peterson tweeted. But it's just, look, you have to compare apples to apples. And I don't think that this chart does that. The profile is just different. I mean, you can go back and look at the image. It's not the same. See that? There's one spike over here and one spike over there. You look at the chart that Jimmy Dore is looking at, and the profile is just completely different from 1996 through 2016. So the period isn't the same anyway. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the profile isn't the same. So we don't know if they're talking about the same measurement. So I'm sorry. I mean, maybe he's talking about something that's true, but it's not comparing an apples to apples thing. So let me see here. I think Nick's radio is trying to get his comment knocked off. I don't know if you saw it. Are you looking at the chat? Because for some reason, I think I'm getting comments that show up for other people. They seem to be blocked on mine, and then I see them. I think I have to unblock them. So I don't know what the hell is happening. Okay, so at 5:29, you ready?
5:29. 1 second. All right, ready.
But skeptics look at the bigger picture, right? So you can see how this has been going up every couple of decades.
I'm having some loading issues, but he said skeptics. I think he actually meant to mean climate scientists. So, fuck, I have to reload it here. This must be like hell watching this.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore
Yeah.
Show. I'm here with the miserable liberals.
Okay.
Warming, right? So he's taking a piece like this, but skeptics look at the bigger
And as Ryo
picture,
says, he
right?
blames
So
my
you can
beard
see
for
how
the
this has
hole
been
in the
going up
ozone
every
layer.
couple of decades. Well, for instance,
Yes, he blames
look at that,
everybody
right? So that's what you
besides
look at.
Axl
You don't
Rose,
look,
who
so
broke up
you
the
look at from
band that he
1970
basically
to
worships.
2012. That's the trajectory of global warming. It's not. It's not this, right? So this is what they do. They go, oh, we'll take it from a 10-year slice from 1997 to 2016. Oh, that's a 20-year slice.
Yeah, look at the fucking chart, Jimmy. It's 603. It's not the same chart, you dumb piece of shit. Okay? You want to debunk a video, you have to... look, I did a video debunk a couple days ago that I wrote out for... I haven't covered it yet because I don't have enough time to do a lot. I mean, this is probably the second video I've done this week. I used to be doing videos every day, if you guys remember. So I did a video debunking this kid who went on... It doesn't matter. It was in Times of Israel. So this kid had made a video declaring that he discovered that Birthright Israel is basically right-wing propaganda. And I made a video where I showed, well, he'd always known that. He didn't discover it. Okay, he'd known that before, and then he went on the trip and staged a walkout, and then he claimed that he discovered it. So you have to go and use actual evidence and showing what somebody actually stated. That's not what they're doing here. Okay, I don't watch Kyle Kulinski. I think that he's probably much better than this. Shiska's saying, I blame fucking gay ass bold worshipping gay ass music, you gay fucker. I mean, I don't understand why he thinks that this is like such a big topic. You know, he has no taste in fucking music. The band that he talks about literally all the time. It took them 12 years. I think it took them 20 years to make their last album. And they wasted, I think it didn't end up being, do you remember Chinese Democracy, the Guns N' Roses album? Yeah. Jim, so how fucking incompetent do you have to be to take that long to produce an album that nobody liked? And he wants to criticize my music choice. And the other thing is, like, he keeps telling me to feature Guns N' Roses videos or Jimi Hendrix on the intro. I would get a strike like right away for that, because those are the videos that are typically, you know, you can't share. I could share a cover of, I could share a cover band of Jimi Hendrix if I wanted. So yeah, Ryu is just trying to get me banned like he is all the time, because he and yeah,
he will single-handedly take down your channel.
Yeah, I mean that's in my opinion, that's pretty gay, trying to get banned all the time. I mean, he might want to look in the mirror there. You know, when you point the finger, let me put my camera. You guys can't see me because I'm, you know, when you point a finger at somebody, there's 3 more pointing back at yourself. That's you, Ryu, buddy. So, nice try. We're not going to show any Guns N' Roses. Okay, anybody hoping that there's going to be any Guns N'... Actually, I might try to find one. I'll find the one that I think... I'll find the Guns N' Roses song that I think that Ryu is going to hate the most, and then I'll feature that one, and we'll see his reaction to that. So, if we can feature it. You are a coward for not having balls. He's tripping out like now because we're making fun of Guns N' Roses. No, he basically, he wouldn't shut up about Guns N' Roses like for 3 straight streams. You know, he just kept mentioning them. It's like ridiculous.
I just love your whole beef just over Guns N' Roses.
Because like no, he started it because he started criticizing literally every piece of music that I wanted to put. And it's like, if he thinks I'm not going to talk, I'll put literally, I'll start putting pieces of music that I hate just because I think that he hates them too. You know, I'll put something like Aqua. It's like I don't give a fuck what he thinks.
Oh, do Barbie Girl, do Barbie Girl.
Yeah, let's go do. I mean, what's another song that's like the dumbest song ever. Let's put something from Menudo. Or no, what's a song I really hate? I know. 1 second. You didn't mention it once, Ryu, you fucking liar. what a piece of shit. He put 3 links to different videos. I think 2 of them were Guns N' Roses and the other was Jimi Hendrix. I mean, what a genius here.
All right. Scrap the Jimmy Dore video. We are getting into this topic right now.
You know what? No, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to derail the topic because he lost his wrench, which I don't know who gave him the fucking wrench anyway. He says my music taste sucks. I mean, you don't have a music taste. You have a music taste that can't be shown on YouTube. So why would anybody? I mean, mention another band that you like. I mean, there's the challenge there. You've had 5 days to ruminate and brood about this. Mention another band that you like. You're complaining that YouTube is hiding your comments, and we got you back on here just so that we can like make fun of your bullshit again. It's like you're basically distributing all of the crap that we could be piling on Jimmy Dore now. He's so salty right now. I wish there was a salt emoji. Let me see if there's a salt shaker here. What a fucking loser. Okay, so 603.
Ready.
And look, climate change. Just look, it's nothing. So that's the disingenuous part. But if you're This is how realists view global warming. This is how skeptics view it. They take it at 10 and 20-year increments. So you could say, look, it's not going. But if you're a realist, you see the trajectory of global warming. Here's another one. He goes, here he tries to downplay the increase of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere by pointing out it's been increasing for a long time and presenting it as just a natural cycle. Look at a graph going further back, and you can easily see the current increase is unprecedented. So here's what he tweets out, and this is a graph that starts at 1800, and here's 2000. And it looks like, oh, look, it's been rising forever. What are you talking about? It's always.
Okay, 703, I have to reload.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. Lung cancer.
Damn it.
Still giving you
Hi, everybody.
problems?
Welcome to the Jimmy Dore
Yeah, it's
Show.
just-
I'm here with the miserable liberal
just
Steph
reloaded
Zamorano
it.
and Ron Placone. Hi, Ron.
Hello.
I'm miserable.
Here we go.
Here's
Ready?
2000.
Yeah.
And it looks like, oh, look, it's been rising forever. What are you talking about? It's always been rising, carbon dioxide. But if you go back a couple 100,000 years, you go back to 800,000 years ago, the Ice Age, everything, and then here we are now. It never went over 300 parts per million. Now we're over 400.
Damn it. So yeah, I'm frozen at 722 now.
Okay.
And now they're talking about the CO2 during the Ice Age, for example, and how it's much larger than Peterson is talking about. And they're using data from the NOAA. Now we're going to talk about the NOAA too. Let me see here. I apologize to everybody in the audience, including Ryu, about the fucking video skipping all the time. But it's honestly, I don't know why it keeps doing that. There's other channels that it happens to as well. I think it might be YouTube's own server, like might be overloaded or something. People are using it you know, I do see playback issues all the time. Okay, so play at 719.
Okay.
Over 300 parts per million. Now we're over 400 parts per million, which they say is catastrophic. Do you see that? Brrr. This is what we're talking about. So that's another one. And then he concludes, he says, pretty much every sentence in the video is bullshit, but I don't want to spend more time debunking it. I'll end this thread with this paragraph from Newsweek's interview where Peterson's climate change scientist denies the link between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. You think I'm kidding? So the scientist that Peterson's tweeting out, who did this beautiful climate change work, said, Lindzen clearly relishes the role of naysayer. He'll even expound on how weekly lung cancer is linked to cigarette smoking. He speaks in full, impeccably logical paragraphs, and he punctuates his measured cadences with thoughtful drags on a cigarette. That's a
So pause at 824. I don't realize, I don't understand who they're talking about with Lindzen, because the scientist I think that Peterson was sharing was Patrick Moore, who is a different climate denier. So I don't know where Lindzen comes in. Maybe he was cited as part of the video, in which case their complaint should be with PragerU more so than with Peterson. And look, I mean, I don't think that Jordan Peterson is the only person who tweets out PragerU videos. But I want to ask a question before we go on. And, you know, I'll let you comment in a second, Adrian. If it's wrong to tweet out misleading or overgeneralizing PragerU videos, then why is it that TYT is partnered with AJ Plus, which also has a lot of very slanted and misleading videos that they share all the time on Facebook? Or what? I mean, is it also wrong to tweet out a Now This video? Because Now This is also all about this hyperbolic, really sensationalized 4 to 5 minute piece that doesn't really explain an entire issue.
Well, the thing is, too, is that the Young Turks many times over, there's plenty of people out there who debunk their stuff as well, and you could easily be called fake news, like stories that are completely misrepresented by the Young Turks, and people will tweet those out, or they'll tweet it out themselves. So it's just the same sort of thing. I mean, if they're going to shit on PragerU for this, then most of their criticisms that they have right now with PragerU could be taken back and just thrown right back in TYT's face. A company that Jimmy's been associated with for many, many years now. I think pretty early on into when TYT was actually created. So it's sort of like live by the sword, die by the sword moment for Jimmy Dore right now.
But well, I have no problem with Jimmy Dore hating the whole premise of the PragerU video, attacking Jordan Peterson for sharing it. But what he's doing, look, the guy who compared the data that was in the Prager video to the climate data, I am convinced, now that I was looking at it, that they're not talking about the same metric. Okay? And if anybody look, I'm not going to call Jimmy a liar. I'm not going to call this Peter Norway guy a liar either, but it's not a convincing debunking, because we're not look, you could talk about climate change over a certain area. You can talk about it over a certain over a certain metric, such as which emission you're talking about. Usually it's CO2. Everybody knows that. You can talk about it as far as temperature changes and everything like that. It's almost like an art form more so than a science, because nobody knows which metric is the most dangerous one, which one is the one to panic about, because they're constantly changing the standards and what the hell is happening. And we'll get to that. I have a few things to go over. So let's keep going. 824. You ready to go?
Okay. Yep.
Some gangsta shit. You're sitting there denying, you're a scientist sitting there denying the link between cancer and cigarettes as you're smoking. That's some pretty badass shit. Tom Cruise will play you in the movie. That's some pretty badass shit. Anyway, but it's not science. It's anti-science. And so I always, I always had my feeling, my gut feeling about Jordan Peterson was that. And then I saw a few articles or a few segments and videos that Kyle Kalinske did on him. And it's always the same kind of thing. It's always like, this guy's a pseudoscientist. He's not real. And he's an anti-intellectual, and he's overly religious. And, he's one of those incel guys.
Is he really?
Yeah. He's one of those. Wow. He believes in forced monogamy and all that stuff.
Whoa.
Pause.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought you would want pause there. 9:15 I'm at.
So he starts talking about how he's one of those incel guys. The dude is married with children. So that right there kind of puts it to bed. And then he
goes into that. So here, let me play a few more seconds.
Okay.
Jeez.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeesh. Yeah. Yeesh. So, but anyway, and now a bunch of everybody's going to talk just about that in the comments.
You're triggered.
He's not incel. He's married. That's all they're going to talk about. Talk about this bullshit climate change thing, please.
So he says, okay, 9:38. I have it paused. He talks about this. This is just a character attack on Peterson for something that was. Now, they already said at the beginning, we don't care if people say we took him out of context. Well, then it's not a real debunking video, because if you're debunking something, you do have to actually address what the person's talking about, not what you think that they're talking about. So they bring up the whole incel thing, which was that somebody asked Peterson a question after the Montreal, the van ramming, whatever you call it. You probably remember better because it was big news in Canada. There was
I think you mean the Toronto one.
Okay, yeah, and there was an Armenian man that who was an incel that rammed a number of people, and that was his response on the spur of the moment. It's not something that he's talked about in a lot of his writings, but here he responds to, on the New York Times and Enforced Monogamy, my motivated critics can contain their joyful glee this week at discovering my hypothetical support for a Handmaid's Tale type patriarchal social structure, as, let's say, hinted at in Nellie Bowles' New York Times article presenting her take on my ideas. It's been a truism among anthropologists and biologically oriented psychologists for decades that all human societies face two primary tasks: regulation of female production so the babies don't die, you see, and male aggression so that everyone doesn't die. The social enforcement of monogamy happens to be an effective means of addressing both issues, as most societies have come to realize. So this is what he means, that conventionally, if you go to a country like, I don't know, Japan, the majority of people grow up and live in, two-parent households, with one parent being a man and the other being a woman. And, the issue with Japan nowadays is that they're not having enough births because, I don't remember what it is. It's some sort of fucked up thing with Japan. But in Japan, it really is a major social issue that they talk about all the time. All the time in Japan. It's a major, I think one of the issues is that dudes are basically buying sex robots and fucking them instead. So,
I think you're right.
Japan, you can make fun of it, but they're actually addressing the problem because they're not into this whole, postmodern. Postmodernism is a buzzword. I'm sure of it. Okay, it does exist, but people use it for everything. But in this case, it's true. The deconstruction of the family unit, which is something I don't cover very often in my videos, is an intention of the academic world right now. They're trying to break down the nuclear family and everything. And basically, in other countries, they don't look at it the same way as we do when people are not having children.
Well, the other thing is too on there, and I think the key word in that description you were talking about, when Peterson was talking about this whole forced monogamy, is he was talking about societal. He did not say at any point he was talking about statism, which is a big difference. And that was something that his people who don't like Peterson were jumping on when he talked about the idea of forced monogamies. They were acting as if he wanted the state to come in and force people in order to get married. But that's not what he was talking about. He's talking about social pressure, which to me has always been the best way if you ever want to change someone's point of view. It has to do with social pressure. This is why the idea, I think, of temporary, oh crap, I'm forgetting the word right now. Oh, temporary ostracization is actually pretty effective. The problem is when it becomes a lifetime ostracization. So this is actually one thing that I talked about when I was doing my my 3-part series on the Parkland shooting, is that at one point that one of the Parkland spokespeople was talking about how this guy who committed the shooting, about how the way he was, and I stated on that video that it's like if you're temporarily ostracizing someone, it has actually it's a good way to get people to change their actions and change their point of view if they have a really nasty point of view. But if you're going to do a lifetime of ostracization, then it's actually quite damaging. So when he's talking about societal, it's not the same thing as having the government come in and force it, but this is exactly the way that everybody presents it when they say forced monogamy. He's just telling people that you shouldn't live a life of that it's not good for society to live a life where you have so many people that aren't getting married, aren't having kids. And I mean, in some ways, we see some of the effects of that right now. That's part of the problem with mass migration. One of the excuses that is used is they talk about the fact that we're not having enough children in order to replace people in society, not enough workers. So we need to import a bunch of people from all these different countries in order to make up for that.
Right, and in Peterson's own response to this, he actually cites somebody who commented on Reddit and said, Peterson is using well-established anthropological language here, and forced monogamy, which I think is a bad term. Like when you use the term enforced, it does sound threatening. So I think whoever decided to use that, it might have been generations ago that they decided in the psychological community or sociological community to use it. But nowadays, using something like enforced monogamy as a term is, people are not going to get behind it. Does not mean government enforced monogamy. Enforced monogamy means socially promoted, culturally inculcated monogamy, as opposed to genetic monogamy and evolutionary dictated monogamy, which does exist in some species but does not exist in humans. So, yeah, I'd be interested to know which species. I'd probably think ducks, I think, are one example. I've heard are evolutionarily monogamous, but I could be wrong. It's also, I mean, I'll admit, I don't know enough about that topic either. But the issue is that they basically took a response that he gave to a question that he used an academic term about, and they twisted it to say, well, he's basically trying to say that women should be in the kitchen and forced to be the servile wives. And I think that there are places where he does seem to say that women tend to have a better role in the home, but I don't think that this is one of them.
If he has said that in the past, I haven't seen him say that.
So let's keep going. We have about 4 more minutes to go.
Okay.
9:38.
Okay.
Please, that's what this video is about.
I'm disappointed he never tweeted back to the guy like, "Oh, you sound triggered. You're an anti-capitalist environmentalist."
He did. I checked his last time I checked. Maybe Jordan Peterson has responded to those devastating takedown by that guy. I don't think he has responded. I mean, do you ever get tired of being taken in by these right-wing con artists? Do you ever get tired of being taken in by guys like Sam Harris, whose next book is called Mental Gymnastics for War? Mm-hmm. I think that's his next book.
Yep. With big words to help.
Big words and spoken softly, how we can justify killing people in a poor country with no army.
Pause on that.
Boy, he is a war hawk. That's
just. I was going to say that. Yeah, they're trying. Sam Harris is on record many times calling himself a liberal, and that he does place himself in the center-left category. He is not on the right. But this is like, it's for some reason they've taken some stance against Sam Harris. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know what your feelings on the guy is. I actually really do like Sam Harris, even though we don't link up completely politically. I still listen to his podcast, and I still like to hear him speak on a lot of subjects. But this is just a complete inaccurate way that they're describing him. I mean, this is also the same people that were talking about how Sam Harris wanted to nuke the Middle East when Sam Harris dedicated a paragraph or two at best on the subject, and all he said about he was doing a what do you call it, a mental exercise where if a radical group such as ISIS got a nuclear weapon, then what other choice do you have? Because this group would without a doubt use it against the US. You may have no choice but to use a nuclear arms against them. But they're constantly misrepresenting the man, as
Right,
same as they're doing right now to Jordan Peterson.
What Sam Harris did, and I wouldn't say that I follow a lot of Sam Harris. I've seen some of the stuff he says just doesn't really interest me, but yes, he is a liberal. I think that him being a neurologist, he takes a very dry approach to most topics, and I've seen him a little more on Rogan and Rubin. And I would say, that they've had Sam Harris on TYT after they basically called him an Islamophobe. And he went through very patiently 3 hours explaining the exact situation you're talking about. It was a hypothetical situation he'd posed where he said that might be a situation, if it happened, that you would need to use nuclear weapons. Okay? Now, of course, Sam Harris is also well known as being kind of, now that Christopher Hitchens is dead, he's kind of the patriarch of the whole, him and Richard Dawkins, the whole new atheist movement. So
I would still say that that Sam Harris has more pull than Richard Dawkins does, though.
Right, and so I would say, he's not a right winger at all, because he's very much against religion. So how can you attack Sam Harris, who's probably the most extreme atheist that there is in terms of beliefs, in the same video that you call Peterson an extreme religious nut? I mean, can you actually satisfy Jimmy Dore? And by the way, I think Sam Harris, some of his videos are very intriguing. And some of them I think he's just ignoring, especially the ones where he talks about U.S. politics. I think he lives in his own world. So I think that there is a point where you can criticize Sam Harris for thinking, Hillary Clinton would have been, the proper. He does say a number of times that he thinks that Donald Trump will be the end of democracy or whatever. I think he doesn't really follow the way that the world's been working in terms of the intelligence community and all that. So I wouldn't say that you can't criticize Sam Harris, but they're not. This is not the way you criticize him. It's the same thing as when right now there's a whole thing with Jeremy Corbyn going down in the UK, and there are certain points where I think they're overdoing the criticism. They're basically conflating literally everything that Jeremy Corbyn does with anti-Semitism, and Sargon of Akkad makes a good point that Jeremy Corbyn it's not so much that he's an anti-Semite, it's that he's a fucking retard, and that he cavorts around with terrorists who he thinks are helping to change the world, and he gets photographed with them, and then he wants to be prime minister or whatever, and it makes him look like a rational person would conclude that he's an idiot. Can we keep going at 10:25?
All right, let's do it.
Sam Harris.
Yeah, and he speaks softly, but he always has the creepiest of creepy looks on his face.
He certainly does.
Like he looks like I made this coffee, and I know this is poison just by the look on your face.
If you want to see him get shredded, watch him quasi debate Chris Hedges and no, I'm blanking on the other gentleman's name, but they did debate. And, Chris Hedges has actually been in the Middle East. He actually learned the language. He actually was a war correspondent for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. He actually is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He knows something about the region.
Mm-hmm. So he was able to be like, look, Sam Harris, a drone strike and a fender bender aren't the same thing, you psychopath.
Yes.
I just want to add that I think everybody here probably has a family member or a friend or somebody in their life that has been a science denier that says, climate change.
Yes.
It's hot like this all the time. You know, we've got rain. There's no climate change. And so, like, when I'm reading these posts that you were showing, I'm just thinking to myself, aren't these people, beyond just being misguided, aren't they also representing the will of corporations? Because corporations are the one that are creating this awfulness in our climates, right? So aren't they just tools of corporations?
Pause at 11:49.
Okay.
So Steph Zamorano, if she wants to make the point that these people are enabling corporations, stop wearing fucking clothes, because those polymers, or what, I mean, if it's cotton or whatever, everything is shipped. Your shirt had to be shipped from Honduras, or you know, at least overland train from Honduras, or from Malaysia or something. So how about you do a favor for the globe and take your top off, Steph Zamorano? If you're so committed to fighting the evil corporations or whatever, that, you know, throw the fucking Mac into the, you know, the PC recycler if you want. You know, everybody. I mean, at the job I used to have, they had like this massive bin where you just throw old computers and they'd recycle them. So where's your fucking principles there? Everything that you use nowadays uses polymers. What are polymers typically made of? Most of them, I think, are made from petroleum. They're petroleum derivatives. So no fucking petroleum out of the ground. There's no goddamn smart-ass branded T-shirt for the miserable liberal. I think that, unfortunately, you know, petroleum products for the time being are not just being used as fuels. They're being used as materials for manufacturing as well. I believe that there are other ways to create these polymers. You know, the biodegradable ones, for example, are not necessarily created from petroleum. I'm not a material scientist, but people that know something about material science would basically laugh. You could make the case that if you really want to save the environment, you'd have to be naked, and you'd also have to live in a house made out of tree bark or something, because there's so much stuff. You know, you have a house made out of insulation, all these glass fibers. I mean, in the walls of your house, there's a lot of insulation. It's not necessarily the most environmentally friendly process to create that insulation. So you need the research and development, the R&D, in order to create more environmentally friendly products. But you're not going to get there by basically bitching about everybody being ignorant besides yourself. Anything to say about that, Jimso?
Well, I was going to say that, two things on that. Number one, since we're talking about climate skeptics and climate realists, there was a report that came out a while ago which said that actually climate skeptics do more to help the environment than the actual climate realists do. And I think that can be shown time and time again. A lot of the people that I see talking about this, they go, like, for instance, Al Gore, he uses a lot of planes to get around to give his talks. In Canada, we have David Suzuki, who's like our lead environmentalist, does the same thing, takes planes everywhere to do his talks. And our environmental minister, Catherine McKenna, holy crap, man, she's constantly flying here to talk at this climate speech or get together, one of those I forget what they're called right now.
Climate conventions. Yeah.
Conventions, thank you. Yeah, so like they're constantly using this. And I also wonder, how did these people get to the studio in order to do this? They probably jumped in their cars and drove over, and in that LA rush hour, you know, so you know, you just stop and go, you waste a lot of gas doing that.
Yeah, unless they're biking. I mean, more power to you if you can bike. I wish I could bike to work. My job is over 40 miles away. It's 3 counties away from me. So people don't have the option of doing this, and yet these people are behaving as if they're, you know, these are the high priests of environmental morality. That's the way I look at them. And Pinochet put like an equally good point in the chat. the lithium mines in China, that's some very, very destructive strip mining in order to get lithium, which is used for the fuel cell batteries in cars. Now,
Almost every single battery these days are lithium ion.
right. So there's a real issue with human consumption in many ways, and I'm again, neither of us is one of these. There's the guy Alex Epstein from I think it's called the Industrial Goals Organization or Institute or something, who is a complete fossil fuels advocate. And I've heard his lecture, and it is pretty interesting. And I don't agree with it. I think that there has to be kind of a move towards other means of creating, first of all, creating energy or harvesting energy, as well as manufacturing materials. But in terms of talking about existing technology, there has to be a realistic perspective. You can't be somebody who says, well, we're always going to use fossil fuels no matter what. And you also can't be some complaining moron who basically looks at everybody as some sort of caveman if they don't understand what you're talking about in terms of, the climate science. And they view everything in the prism of climate science. It's almost as if that's like it's like their 10 commandments.
That's a very interesting way to put it, but yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, a lot of people have started calling climate science basically a new secular religion, just like SJWs are a secular religion. Bold, how about the batteries in her vibrator? Ill. Shiska's redeeming himself today. So, okay, play at 11:44.
Okay.
Climates, right? So aren't they just tools of corporations?
Yes, I would agree. I would say so. I would say certainly.
So what's the end game for somebody like this with lazy thinking? Like, does he really believe?
Jordan Peterson?
Yes. Does he really believe that climate change doesn't?
Is a hoax?
Yes. Does he really?
Why would you tweet that out? Why else would you tweet that out? I wouldn't tweet that out unironically. I wouldn't try to trigger someone with fake science. What do you get out of that? You tell me. Anyway, so there you go. I don't. There's like these are considered so Jordan Peterson's considered like the intellect of that new dark web or whatever. What did they call it anyway? Not he doesn't seem to be that deep of a thinker, and that's coming from a guy who's not either. Takes one to know one. But I certainly know the difference between science and bullshit. Thanks for watching. Please make sure you're subscribed, even if you think you are.
So I think I missed it when I should have put down the timestamp, but at some point, so the video is kind of over already, but there's a certain point where he goes and he says that Peterson had basically claimed that there's no such thing as an atheist. Okay? And I have Peterson's book here, and I wouldn't say it's the greatest book in the world. At certain points, it gets kind of boring and just really, I don't know what you would call it. It's kind of like the chicken soup for the, maple syrup soul type of thing. But I should stop using the maple syrup stereotype because it's getting old. What's another stereotype of you Canadians?
Beavers?
Yeah, Moose? Beavers, drunk driving, and hockey.
Lumberjacks?
And bacon. You guys eat a lot of bacon too, right?
Oh, hell yeah. You don't know what you're missing, man, with your kosher.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I've had a long time ago before we were religious, I did have bacon. I wasn't blown away by it, but we have that fakin. Have you ever had it, the turkey bacon?
No, I haven't.
It's not quite the same. So in any case, I heard it is a little healthier though. So they claim that he said that there's no such thing as an atheist. On page 224, He says, if you pay attention to what you do and say, you can learn to feel a state of internal division and weakness when you are misbehaving and misspeaking. It's an embodied. Do I have the right one here? Okay, yeah. A state of internal division and weakness when you are misbehaving and misspeaking. It's an embodied sensation, not a thought. I experienced an internal sensation of thinking and division, of sinking and division, rather than solidity and strength when I am incautious of my acts and words. It seems to be centered in my solar plexus where a large knot of nervous tissue resides. I learned to recognize when I I was lying, in fact, by noticing this sinking and division, and then inferring the presence of a lie. It often took me a long time to ferret out the deception. Sometimes I was using words for appearance. Sometimes I was trying to disguise my own true ignorance of the topic at hand. Sometimes I was using the words of others to avoid the responsibility of thinking for myself. So Peterson in this passage is talking about the ways that I think a little more about cognitive dissonance, the ways that people rationalize things that, and everybody does it, but the way people rationalize things that they know to be wrong. And then he says, if you pay attention when you are seeking something, you will move towards your goal. More importantly, however, you will acquire the information that allows your goal itself to transform. A totalitarian never asks, what if my current ambition is an error? He treats it instead as the absolute. It becomes his God for all intents and purposes. It constitutes his highest value. It regulates his emotions and motivational states and determines his thoughts. All people serve their ambition. In that matter, there are no atheists. There are only people who know and don't know what God they serve. So I hope, how about Adrian? Did you understand what the point of that was?
I think more than anything, he was going on the idea that everybody has something that they believe in, and sometimes that manifests itself in different ways. So whether that be for the religious types, it'd be God, or for the non-religious types, it's something else that regulates what their beliefs are and what their morals are. In a way, you could say that. Some people would even say government have also been one that I've heard. And I think this can be true, but I also think it depends, because sort of like how there's a lot of different ways that people believe in God. I think that some believe it more as a state of mind, some believe it as a form of rules that need to be followed, and others will believe in the actual deity itself. I think it just depends. Because for me, I don't really think I fall into any one of those categories, because I don't really say I'm not a government I'm not a government guy. I don't really have something that in my own life, I would perceive as some sort of belief or some sort of God in that respect. But I do think that for the majority of people on this planet, they need something to believe in. And if you are the religious type, then it's pretty obvious where you go to. But if you're not religious, you have something else that you point to. And I think that's why also a lot more atheists fall on the left, which is along with the idea that I think the left wing of politics was more welcoming to atheists in the past. I think also it has to do with when you don't believe in a God that could solve your problems, you're looking for a more I want to say I'm going to say down to earth, if you understand what I mean, like a down to earth sort of solution to it. And for a lot of people, that's government.
Yeah. So what you're saying, I think, is like everything you're talking about fits into kind of what he's mentioning, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with politics or society. He's saying basically that if you have an idea or a belief that you're very committed to, that becomes the religion of yours. So even atheism, in a sense, if you're a really hardcore atheist, then atheism is to some extent your religion. Okay, just as an example. So therefore, everything becomes dogmatic in that sense, and you serve that purpose. So let's throw in. I mean, there's these people who are huge. Here's an example. Okay, pit bull owners. There are people who are pit bull owners who will deny that there's anything vicious about the pit bull as a breed. And despite incident after incident of children or bystanders being mauled by these pit bulls, they claim that their pit bull is the nicest pet ever, and you just have to be able to function around it and keep it, in the right environment and everything. And it doesn't matter that you can show, hormonally they have just this bigger hyperaggression, and and forget about whether behaviorally they're worse, because the people will say, oh, poodles bite more people than pit bulls. Well, the pit bull is much more. If you look at the strength and structure of a pit bull, it's much more of a big deal than being mauled by a poodle. So they're basically they're trying to arrive at any conclusion possible to justify the continued ownership of a pit bull. Okay, it doesn't matter whether the facts show that pit bulls happen to be more vicious than other dogs. Okay, I'm not taking a position on the pit bull issue, by the way, but they completely took his quote to mean that he literally does not think that atheists exist at all, and they didn't even look at it and read it. So it's not even taking it out of context. It's basically believing hearsay. That's the way they look at Jordan Peterson. And in this respect, Jimmy Dore and Ron Placone and Steph Zamorano, the three people in the video, they're behaving the same way that the corporate media that they criticize is behaving in this case. Because Jordan Peterson, if you think that he's such a hack in regards to this climate science, why didn't you just look at his videos and see what he really said about those other topics that you were mentioning? Instead, what they did was they went along with little tropes that other people have written about Peterson, such as Michelle Goldberg, who herself is probably one of the biggest frauds ever. She's one of those Me Too fakes. She's constantly politicizing Me Too, making it a partisan issue, when in reality you should treat Democrats and Republicans with the same presumption of innocence. By the way, I last week I said, if they can't produce any evidence against Keith Ellison, I don't care if he beat that woman, because unfortunately he has the same constitutional rights as anybody else. I don't know if you've heard of that issue, but
No.
we have the guy who's the deputy chair of the Democratic National Committee is accused of beating his former girlfriend. And she claims that there's a video of him, but she can't find it. And I said, look, I hate Keith Ellison. I think he's a lying piece of crap. And yet, if you don't have any proof, there's no reason for me to attack him for this. So, then the test becomes, do these leftists who believed in the listen and believe issue, that's their new religion, listen and believe. Listen and believe in these rape accusers and these spousal abuse accusers or whatever. And that was their religion for a long time. And suddenly they have a person on their side at a very senior level who is subject to the same accusations, and they don't treat it the same way. He won the primary, the Democratic primary in Minnesota, as they say. And then the Democratic Party certified it over there, and they took a vote and they endorsed him, even though he's under these accusations. So instantly, the whole premise of believing in the victim's testimony and taking it seriously is smashed to bits, because it doesn't make any sense. The institution has validated this person despite serious accusations on the part of a victim. So people like me don't know what to do now, because I would like Keith Ellison to get the same type of rights as a defendant as anybody else. But he's never stood up for any of the other people accused of such crimes in the same manner.
And actually, I would say that even a more recent example of that has to do with there was one of Harvey Weinstein's accusers who we just found out a couple days ago ended up getting herself accused by a man of sexual assault. And then when everything was coming out with Harvey Weinstein, Rose McGowan was tweeting about how, you know, you need to believe survivors when they step forward, and a few other things about that. Then as soon as this woman gets accused of it, she's saying she wants everybody to wait for more information, you know, and let's hear the whole story and this, that, and the other. So there she is. Like, she was totally ready to throw one man under the bus, but as soon as it was turned around on them, she's saying, no, we can't jump to conclusions now. So yeah, we're seeing this manifest itself in a few different ways. And there was also recently, a few weeks ago, there was one of the main leaders in the Me Too movement. He ended up getting accused of sexual assault too. So yeah, whenever it turns itself around, people are totally willing to wait there for all the evidence. We want to make sure that we hear everything about what's happened with this woman. Second a guy is accused of it, thrown out. I mean, at the beginning of the year, up here, we had a guy who was running for he's running to be premier, which is the same as a governor in America. He was running for premier of Ontario. Then someone came out and accused him of sexual assault, which pretty much by now has been proven to be bullshit. And within hours, he was forced to resign his position. And then there was a federal MP, a female MP, who was accused by a Canadian veteran of pretty much a similar circumstance, where he said that they had an inappropriate relationship, how she was kind of stalking him, and how she was certain things that she did, like she served him alcohol when he was on painkillers, even though she's an ex-nurse, so she knows what happens when you do that sort of thing. And
that's a fatal. I mean, oxy and alcohol are basically suicide cocktail.
Yeah. But then he's also saying how she was coming on to him, even though he wasn't really down for it. Anyway, so for her, she ended up getting suspended for a little bit until an investigation was going, where they went through the investigation process. But if we're holding up to the same standards, she should have been forced to resign her position immediately. But there just seems to be a double standard when we're talking about things like sexual assault and the Me Too movement.
Well, the double standard is the issue with every social justice topic, because social justice doesn't really, the justice part is not really an element. It's a misnomer. It should be, I would call it societal revenge, and often they call it restorative justice here in social justice communities. And what it really means is instead of creating equality, they say, let's take the dial in an unjust situation and take it from one extreme to the polar opposite extreme. In the same way that they've been doing in, for example, in South Africa now, and you could look at there's plenty of, I mean, the climate change issue. Okay, getting back to the topic of this video, yes, we had very pollutive industries for many, many years, and now, because of this climate change obsession, they're changing the dial all the way to the other side, but for the wrong reasons and with the wrong solution. So in this case, with Me Too, the issue is that you're not creating equality between men and women. You're just creating the situation where the accountability is not the same for both sides, because you want to claim that victims are going to have a greater advantage in the court system and in the public opinion system, the public opinion sphere, than the accused. That's not equality. That's actually creating a different injustice. So people talk a lot about reverse racism in terms of affirmative action and other discriminatory practices towards majority populations. I don't call it reverse racism. I call it basically, flipping the pole on a situation. You just flip from one extreme to another, and I think it's totally against the most basic liberal principles of any Western society. Liberal in terms of not being socially liberal in terms of the ability to process things in a rational way.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in a lot of ways, I find that there are no real liberals around anymore, or at least not the way I used to think they were. Like, I used to think that it stood for something, but these days, when even the people who call themselves liberals, they fall much farther on the left wing of politics, and that's both politicians and also people in society who see themselves as liberals. One thing that again, we go back to the fact we were doing Jimmy Dore tonight is that the Young Turks, they like to use the term progressive and liberal interchangeably. When they're not interchangeable terms, they actually stand for different things. But this is the point that we're at these days, that it's just things have gotten so far to the extremes that people who call themselves liberals are actually much more leftist. They're progressive. Some of them are even as far as Marxists.
Right. The Liberal Party, and we were involved in writing a lot of stuff about. I mean, you did that Canada 2020 video, for example, and I hope to get back to some of the work I'm doing on that eventually. But what the issue is that the Liberal Party is an institution that started as something else back in the late 1800s, and those ideals have been completely replaced in Canada. Who would think that nowadays the Liberal Party is basically removing statues or participating in, I guess the NDP is also in Canada, removing statues of people like what's his name, Andrew MacDonald.
John A. Macdonald.
John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, who, I think people should be able to criticize historical figures. And if people want to add like a plaque that says, hey, this guy basically, he banged the pharmacist's daughter or something, for example, and didn't wrap it up. Like people want to put something that's critical of somebody on the statue's base or something. I personally have no objection to it. I think it's kind of solving a problem that nobody really cares about except for these types of people. But I think that that's a better solution than removing statues. But that's what the Liberal Party today is okay with.
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, which was when it came down to the 2015 election, the Liberal Party, which is actually went more left-wing with what they wanted to do than the New Democratic Party did. And the New Democrats are, for all intents and purposes these days, socialists. So he went, like Trudeau brought his party more to the far left. And then in provincial politics, a lot of the Liberals, the Liberal governments, they're also going much farther to the left. I mean, hell, one thing that in my province that the Liberal premier did before she was voted out of office was she instituted essentially a pharmacare program, which is, I mean, that was straight out of Bernie Sanders' playbook right there. And we're even seeing this in the Democratic Party in America now, that just so many of them want to institute these far left policies. And yeah, they're tearing down statues. They want to completely destroy the history that they see offensive. One thing about doing that too is the whole point of studying history is you figure out what went down in the past, but it's also to avoid making the same mistakes. If you're going to remove statues of people who have done bad things, for instance, if it's a Confederate, just as an example, then you're just going to be forgetting the lessons that history is trying to teach you, and you're just bound to repeat it over and over again. And it's a shame to see.
Yeah, I think the Confederate statues issue here in the U.S., people were saying at the time when it just started that eventually they would remove statues of figures that once were considered universally critical to U.S. history, such as George Washington. And lo and behold, at a certain point, there was a church where Robert E. Lee's portrait was featured. It happened to be the same church where George Washington had been worshiping. And people protested against featuring the photos and the relief photo. And eventually they said, well, you have to take down the Washington, not the photo, the portrait. And eventually they had to take down both. So at a certain point, these people, they're basically, why do we call them cultural Marxists? Is because they do want to destroy basically society as it's existed until now. There are a lot of people, and not all of them are conservative, who have started calling it the beginning of a new Chinese-style cultural revolution where you destroy traditional society entirely. Back in China, they were doing it with certain Buddhist and Taoist texts at the time. And I'm not Buddhist or Taoist, but that type of destruction of heritage of China was very traumatic for the society at the time. And, it basically signaled the failure of the Maoist era, because he didn't feel that he'd already failed to materially sustain China and turn it into a global economic power. This is what people forget. People like to say, oh, China became a global power under communism. Well, economically, it took until after Mao for that to happen. What he was doing at the time when he was in power was he was basically creating these massive social experiments that were just devastating entire sections of the country. And because he just had this massive pool of people to draw on, he would just, he could get away with it because he had all of these people who were his armed followers, in the Red Guards or there was, of course, he had a vibrant secret police under Kang Sheng and a military under Lin Biao. I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but what he did was he created a China that was militarily powerful, but that was economically and industrially kind of a joke. They were producing a lot of military equipment that was subgrade at the time, and they were basically trying to copy the Soviet Union, and they just happened to have a large enough population that they were a military power. But yeah, it took until after Mao died and Deng Xiaoping liberalized the economy, for lack of a better term, and started trading with Japan and restoring China's place in the world and reversing the elements of the Cultural Revolution that set China back, for China to become the industrial power that it is today. And now China has basically, it's definitely not the communist system that people thought would be instituted in the late 40s when the communists took power. You're really talking about a China that has, I wouldn't say that it's a system that's good, but it's definitely different from what they were talking about.
Funny thing is, too, is I've even heard these people that are trying to push back about this idea of cultural Marxism, how it's a made-up term and it doesn't exist. But it's actually a pretty simple process to understand, because at first, when the idea was set down by Karl Marx and it was implemented by Lenin and them in Russia, it was supposed to be more of an economic way of life. It was supposed to be a political economics. So, that was the idea of destroying the class system and trying to redistribute wealth in order to make people equal on an economic level. But that crashed and burned. But now the idea is to do it on a social level, which is exactly what cultural Marxism is. And it is, without a doubt, being a form of indoctrination right now. I mean, we can just look at what we hear about the Long March to the institutions, which, judging from the way that colleges' campuses are now, it seems to have been pretty damn effective, because over the course of, since I think it was about the 80s when it really started to take root, all the way up to now. So we're talking, 30, 35 years or so. We've seen how a whole generation has suddenly shifted, especially in the U.S., which in a lot of ways, the U.S. was always a little more tilted towards the right wing of politics than the rest of Europe, and even Canada. In a lot of ways, I would say that you could probably find more comparisons with Canada's Conservative Party towards the Democrats than you could towards the Republicans. But because of that reason, we're just seeing how there's this huge shift where we have literally people walking underneath the communist banner and are trying to get a communist regime implemented into the U.S. now. It is indoctrination, full blown.
Yeah, and I think what's funny is that whenever you accuse them of being a communist or a socialist, they tend to say, well, you're just red baiting, and no, you are using symbolism and rhetoric that is actually almost word for word from the manuals of some of these, whether it's the 60s radical socialists and communists, or it's Karl Marx himself or one of the other communist philosophers. there's Gramsci from Italy, for example. These anarcho-communists, and they like to say, well, our system is completely different from the ones that have that you've been addressing. And I always tell them, yeah, your system sucks in a different way. Your system is a different type of garbage. Okay, it's the same way as the way people separate their recycling plastics versus papers or whatever. Yeah, you're in the compost heap too. Okay, that's basically my approach to it, because they go and try to parse words about how communism has to be, socialism has to be viewed as this experimental process because capitalism has had so many centuries and failed. Look, I want you to point out the country that is an industrial capitalist society. They always point at Haiti or Somalia. No, 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 no. A clannish, traditional tribal society like Somalia is not capitalism. Okay? It's not capitalism. I don't know how they recognize Somalia as a capitalist country, because maybe they think because there's no laws or whatever. Well, you don't want any laws either. You don't respect the laws of any of the countries where you're active. I'm talking to the Marxists. You see them go to countries like you see them in France rioting literally all the time. So why should they criticize Somalia when they're basically creating Somalia in France? But as I was saying, they keep saying that capitalism has had so much time and it's already failed. No, you look at these countries where they have instituted communism of whatever stripe it is, and they are failures, and they like to say, well, that wasn't real communism. I don't care if it's whether you think it's like the cheap, crappy parking lot meth type communism, or it's the blue ice of Heisenberg type pure communism that you want. I'm using the Breaking Bad reference because I just told a joke about it a few hours ago, but your vision of communism is not the vision of communism that can actually be implemented, because the people who actually succeed in implementing this are not stoners with dreads wearing board shorts skateboarding around Portland. Okay, nobody who fits that profile has ever accomplished anything ever, besides probably getting onto the playbill over at Burning Man or something. That's an accomplishment in their world. Okay, in the world of communism, you talk about what are the communist countries that have actually come about. Those are the ones that are totalitarian. You look at Vietnam. You can look at nowadays Nepal, which has become more of a communist country due to a long war. You look at Afghanistan, became communist due to a Soviet invasion, one that for some reason the left never talks about, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. You look at all these examples of countries where it came about. It never came about due to somebody like the people who are now advocating communism. These people who are basically hanging out by, the the water fountain downtown in whatever city that they're currently plundering. That's the profile of the modern Western communist. Just a total personal and professional failure.
Well, the thing is, too, is they say that capitalism has failed, but the capitalist societies are the ones that can stand for hundreds of years, and even they can actually face the economic downturns that we end up seeing. I mean, we've had plenty, or even over just the last 100 years, and they still are here to stay. But one thing I've talked about is that the private sector is the foundation of if I can use like a house as an example, it's the foundation of a house. If you're going to whittle away at the foundation of the house, then eventually it's going to topple over. And this is the difference between the private sector and the public sector. The public sector needs the private sector in order to fund all of its different policies that they want to push. As soon as you take that all away, the whole thing is going to come crumbling down. And all these societies that they want absolutely everyone to be treated as equals. It never works. We can never actually have an absolutely equal society. There are always going to be inequalities, and there's just nothing that you can do about them. But in this idea, in the Marxist world, the biggest sin or the biggest crime you can commit is not agreeing with them, and we see this all the time. I mean, right now, actually, with my own prime minister, he never gets more upset at somebody and belittles people more than when they don't agree with him on his policies. There was actually even something this past week where this woman was asking him.
I saw that. Yeah, go ahead.
You did, eh? Yeah, this woman was asking him when his government's going to refund Quebec 146 million for all the illegal immigrants that have crossed the border. He didn't answer her question, and he just immediately jumped onto her, saying how her racism has no place here and it has no place in Canada. So this is a guy that can go around telling another Canadian that she has no place in her own country, but for some reason the illegal immigrants do have a place in Canada. So it's just this is something that we see plenty of times when we're discussing whether it be the Marxists or the social justice warriors, which they're pretty close together. They're not far off. But yeah, it's like this is where also you see the most censorship from. The censorship that went on in all these communist areas was absolutely horrendous. And I mean, I think just about every country has its own problems with censorship, but never are they worse than in these countries. The freedom of the press doesn't exist in these countries. The freedom of speech or an expression don't exist in these countries. Because like we can look at any examples from whether it happened to be Mao, whether it was Stalin, or even for Pol Pot from the Khmer Rouge, you couldn't have a different belief, and that was one reason that they actually took a campaign against religion in those countries. Now, I always think that had more to do with control more than anything else, rather than them just not liking religion that much. It was about controlling the narrative. But we ended up hearing all these terrible things that ended up happening to these people when they went against the official narrative. For instance, in Russia, in the Soviet Union, you got thrown into their gulags, and from there you were treated just like an animal. You got starved, you got tortured, you were left in there sometimes for years upon years, way worse than what we would actually throw someone away in prison for. These days, if you really got hit with something in your country that would be considered hate speech, you go away, and it was bad enough for them to arrest you. You would maybe go away for a few months, maybe a year, but in those countries, you would just go away for sometimes a decade, sometimes more. Sometimes you never came back. There was plenty of incidents where people died in those prisons, and a lot of them were forced labor camps. So
yeah, there were, and it wasn't. I mean, there was a variety of them. One of the things that they used to do was put people in mental hospitals. So
that's true.
With actual crazy people, there were also incidents where, the Soviet justice system, there was, for example, there was a serial killer from southwestern Russia, Andrei Chikatilo, where they did the investigation. They found a person that they believed to be the murderer of a number of women, and they executed him the same day that they convicted him. It turned out to be the wrong guy. So it's like appeals process, please. That's like the type of justice system that they want summary justice. They want everything instituted immediately. Pol Pot, you mentioned. The reason that he was, he had executed every person who owned a piece of glass or a pair of glasses, because those were the intellectuals, and his followers he deliberately chose from, the peasantry out in the countryside that had never been exposed to the French colonial society, because he was able to mold them very easily. So I do want to wrap up. But
okay.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of, and of course we extrapolated a lot from the Jimmy Dore video. And I want to tell people, you should still check out Jimmy Dore's channel if you want to at least see. I do think he's a good barometer of what's happening on the left. But this really was something that I thought was just a tremendous show of just him doing the obligatory attack piece on Jordan Peterson, who, again, I've said I've been reading his book. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's a great book. It's not a bad book, but it's kind of there are passages where you see him really give some good insights on addiction and on parental, very serious problems with parenting, which I think are worth reading just for reference. But it's not the greatest book ever, like some people are making it out to be. And on that note, yeah, when you mentioned the whole Trudeau incident where he says you don't belong in Canada or whatever, it's the same thing happening here with Governor Cuomo saying that we're not making America great. America was never that great. It's like, your dad was the fucking governor of your state for 3 terms, and you're trying for your 3rd term. Maybe you're the part of the problem, Andy Cuomo. Maybe you're part of the problem, Justin Trudeau. You've had all these chances, all these, spaces that you've skipped in life because you happen to be connected to the right person, your dad. Maybe it's time for a change, and that change has to be getting rid of these people. Any last thoughts before we leave, Jimso?
Yeah, just for me, one thing that one of the reasons that I have support for Jordan Peterson is because he's put a lot of things into perspective for me. In a way, he was probably one of my very first red pills to a lot of the situations that we were facing. On top of this, one thing I really enjoyed, I know it might sound funny coming from an atheist, but I actually really enjoyed his biblical series that he did. And he actually stated, I don't remember which episode it was, but in one of his episodes that he did for the biblical series, he actually stated that the reason he did it was to bring a more secular understanding to people out there of to what the point of the Bible was and religion. And even though I still don't like have any interest or get involved in religion itself, I found that through him, I got a better understanding of it, and because of it, it's just sort of, I find because of it, I can actually have a more intelligent conversation when we're talking about religion. I can articulate my own feelings better, and I can also understand where people come from a lot better. And that's actually where I started developing some of my problems with the atheist community, which is why I don't get involved with it. Is just a lot of them, they like to deal with the idea that just anybody who partakes in religion is kind of just an idiot and easily manipulated, which sure, I would say that there's definitely some in there, but for a lot of people, it has a much deeper understanding for it. So because he opened my eyes to this is why I have a lot more support for Jordan Peterson, and I found that he put it in a way that I could understand.
Right, because you're able to ignore all of his fatwas against Salman Rushdie, right?
You know it, man. Poor guy needs to keep in hiding all the time.
All right, so that's about it. This was, really went pretty long, even for a 13-minute video, but I enjoyed it a lot. I wanted to get this. I didn't want to forget about doing this. So we were talking with Adrian Lloyd, Just My Stupid Opinion, on YouTube. You can find him also on Twitter at Jimso Podcast. Anywhere else?
Yes, you can find me on Steemit at Knucklehead if you look it up. That's where I kind of post my own articles, if I can call them that. It's really just a blog post, but you can also find me there, and you can also find me on Gab at the same as my Twitter handle. Okay, and please, I will call the roll of all the people that appeared. So Ryo Shiska and Ryu Shiska, A. Pinochet, Chris Kroll. Larry was in there earlier. High Desert Pioneer, I saw you. Nick's Radio, and could be it. So thanks everybody for sticking around. I hope it was at least interesting, and I hope we were fair to Jimmy too, because then we would be full of shit as well. So please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment when the video uploads. You should get a notification if you're subscribed. By the way, most people are not receiving my notifications, so I'm considering doing an email list. Please email me below if you want to be included at chefleopard@gmail.com.
All right. Have a good night, Adrian, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Have a good one, Bold.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.